Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Don't say good morning because then it'll get loud again. Welcome to the 2023 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. I'm Cynthia Lopez. I'm the proud director of the Inclusion Collaborative, and I'm so excited to share this space with you today. I want to take a moment to say hello to our virtual participants out there. So everyone say hello to our virtual participants. Virtual participants, if you can say hello back, I invite you to turn your cameras on even just for a moment so that we can see your wonderful faces. We have this amazing setup in this room, and I'd like to give a huge shout out to Sung Park and Lindsay, who are working very tirelessly in the back there to set up a space where we could really connect our virtual participants and our in-person participants. So every now and then, we'll nod. And those of you as virtual participants, we are so happy that you're here with us. We see you. We see every single one of you. So if you ever get a chance and would like to turn your camera on just briefly, we'd love to say hello. Okay, so I'd like to kick off our conference by inviting one of the biggest inclusioneers that we know at the Inclusion Collaborative, and I think many of you will agree. Our county superintendent of schools, Dr. Marianne Dewan, who's championed inclusion efforts not only at the county level, but statewide as well. Dr. Dewan ensures that we, the Inclusion Collaborative, always has a seat at the table, at every important decision-making table, and we are so appreciative of that. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dewan.
Thank you so much, Sandia, and good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here with all of you today. As county superintendent, I get to do a number of really fun things, and I have a number of favorite things. Like everything's my favorite, but the Inclusion Collaborative is one of my absolute favorite organizations, groups, and the annual conference is always incredibly inspiring. It is also wonderful to look across the room and see so many people that I know, colleagues coming back year after year, some of our team members supporting this work, as well as how we're embedding all of the efforts of the Inclusion Collaborative and the resources of the Inclusion Collaborative as we support our school districts with their LCAPs, with differentiated assistance, with some of their school level efforts and program development as well. So it is just really an honor and privilege to be able to welcome you here today. I'm also very excited because this is the 10th annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. And I was here for the first one. So I remember just getting this started and really trying to organize our community and partner with the state and others to bring this amazing resource to the state of California. So 10 years is quite a milestone. I also want to express some gratitudes. I think it's really important as we're all leading efforts around inclusion and equity, promoting the diversity of our community, and focusing on partnership, that we take time to also express gratitude. This isn't easy work. It's hard work. You're all doing the hard work, and having this conference is something that is only made possible because of that commitment to hard work, the commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, and to partnership. So youth of all ages and regardless of their abilities have had added success, experienced growth in their academics and their social emotional learning, their overall well-being as a result of the work that you all do. And because of individuals such as yourselves who continue to learn and advocate on behalf of our students with disabilities and on behalf of all of our students. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge several very valued partners. First and foremost, I want to thank Senator Dave Cortese. Any of you who are familiar with the Bay Area might remember Senator Cortese when he was on the Board of Supervisors here in Santa Clara County. And as a state senator now, he has also been a highly valued partner in advancing efforts around inclusion and providing infrastructure and support for the California Department of Education, county offices of education, and school districts to advance efforts to improve least restrictive environment access for students with disabilities across the state of California, including making it more visible to understand what LRE means and how work we can do together will improve our ability to serve more and more students in the least restrictive environment for them along that whole continuum of special education. So we know inclusive practices are possible at all levels of the continuum. I also want to thank some members of the County Board of Education, and I'm going to name all of them, but I want to start with naming Trustee Maymona Afzal-Berta, and I don't know if she's here in the room. We were expecting her, so I don't see her, but she is the board liaison to the Inclusion Collaborative and our Warmenhoven Advisory Board. And as a former teacher herself, she is also a champion of this work. And so I do want to say thank you to Trustee Berta for taking on the extra responsibility of being the liaison to the Inclusion Collaborative Warmenhoven Advisory Board. The other members of the County Board of Education include our President, Victoria Chan, who is also a teacher, Trustee DeSalvo, Trustee Laurie, Trustee Grace Ma, and Trustee Don Rocha, and the Vice President of the County Board of Education, Tara Sri Krishnan. I also want to take a moment to thank the cabinet members who serve on my team and help advance this work throughout all of the work of the County Office of Education, really about integration. So I see a couple are here present. So I do want to say thank you to Debbie Gorgulo, Assistant Superintendent. She's over there on the side. So as a former teacher myself, I taught both general education as well as special education. As a former director of special education, a role that I loved despite its many challenges. I'm assuming there are some directors of special education in the room. As a consultant and trainer, spending many decades providing training and resources to advance all types of efforts around inclusion and inclusive practices, advancing efforts to improve outcomes for students with disabilities across the United States, here in California, and in other parts of the world as well. This event is near and dear to my heart. I truly believe that all students, regardless of their abilities or disabilities or the labels that we attempt to put upon them, have a right to a high quality, inclusive education, to be seen, and to be able to innovate means to make changes, to introduce new methods, ideas, or products, and to truly believe in the full capacity of the young people who are in front of us. In order to do this, educators and students need spaces where they feel comfortable to explore, to question, and to respectfully test limits. When surrounded by encouragement and acceptance, collaboration and innovation can foster problem solving, creativity, acceptance, welcoming, inclusion, and belonging. Inclusion allows for individuals to be seen for the assets they behold, their strengths, their contributions, and not their challenges. Over the course of the next 2 days, you will have the opportunity to learn from leading experts, current practitioners, and of course, all of you are experts as well, so you'll learn from each other. I encourage you to use this time to engage with an open mind and a sense of wonder. Virtual attendees here as well. I know. How's that?
2, 3.
All right,
2.
very good. So I also want to take a moment to acknowledge some others who make this event possible, including our sponsors. So at the Inclusion Champions level, we are thankful to the first 5 of Santa Clara County who have long been partners of the County Office of Education and the Inclusion Collaborative, and also our very own Strong Start Coalition, who advance efforts to increase access to early care and education. At the inclusion leaders level, we have EPIC, our education preparation for inclusive classrooms program. We have a table outside in the foyer. I encourage you to take a look at the offerings of our educator preparation programs. They also include LEAP, our Leaders in Educational Administration program. A big thank you as well to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. As a community foundation, they have long supported for at least the 10 years that I've been able to partner with them. They have been huge supporters of our work. At the inclusion facilitator level, Lakeshore, they make amazing products. I'm sure you've all seen or used them in your classrooms. And at the inclusion advocates level, the Riley Project, the Discovery Source, Changing Perspectives, and I know we have some board members from Changing Perspectives joining us as well, and the Scholastic Education Solution. So a big round of applause to all of our sponsors. And I also want to use my privilege as the county superintendent of schools to give an extra special status of gratitude to Charmaine Warmenhoven. Charmaine Warmenhoven is a former teacher, a community member who has generously provided annual donations to the Inclusion Collaborative for almost 15 years, significant donations. The reason that we have the stability that we have to offer the Inclusion Collaborative is because of the generosity of Charmaine Warmenhoven, as well as Charmaine's commitment that she has held for many decades to advance inclusion for all students with disabilities along the entire continuum. So if you would all please join me in celebrating Charmaine Warmenhoven. So I want to close with just encouraging all of you to engage in these opportunities for learning with an open mind and a sense of wonder. You are all a source of inspiration to me. I know that what happens and what matters most is what you are doing each and every day at our school sites, in our classrooms, in conversations with parents. We can have vision, we can have commitment, we want to support you, but it is really all of you who have the power to do this work for our young people. And you are a source of inspiration to me as well as others. Sometimes we don't always get to see the fruits of our labor, but I want each of you to know just how impactful you are. Students are able to be their authentic selves and explore innovative practices because you care about them. I also want to thank Sandia Lopez, our director of the Inclusion Collaborative, Sandia, for her leadership and putting on this conference. And all of the Inclusion Collaborative staff who are amazing, and they're going to wave so we can say thank you to them. And to all the volunteers, you'll see them, they're all wearing this fancy t-shirt. So say thank you to them today as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dewan, for that wonderful welcome. So as she mentioned, Inclusion Years Innovate, that's our theme this year. Each year we come together to share ideas on what our conference theme will be. It's definitely a fun time. We vote, we do all of that good stuff. If I may ask someone at each table, please turn on the centerpiece. If you tap, 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 you may have already done that. I see you problem solvers out there. Something's not working. Tap, tap, that'll change the light. And lights, please. In the room, lights, please. This year we landed on the theme Inclusioneers Innovate. The centerpieces at each table have our conference branding and light up, and all were created in our very own makerspace. Thank you. As we spend, thank you. Yes, that's my favorite part of it. As we spend the next few days together, we recognize that innovation thrives only when we welcome every perspective. Today, as we gather at the 10-year anniversary of our state conference, we must keep in mind that innovation has the power to unite us. Okay, I'm going to go over just some quick protocols and introduce someone very special, and then we will move over to our wonderful keynote. Just some directional things. Our all-gender restroom is located south building, so the other side there on the second floor. We have privacy and nursing rooms, north building first floor and south building second floor. We know that you know people here in the county office, and we know you want to wander and say hello to everybody, and that's fine. But we do ask if you could just maybe head over to the information desk or that register, the front desk. They can call whoever it is that you want to say hello to, so that you're not just roaming around throughout the office. Lunch will be located just to the left of this room where breakfast was served. We need to go over some emergency preparedness. In the event of emergency, we like to identify folks who are CPR and first aid certified. So if you are first aid certified, CPR certified, can you raise your hands just really quickly? Folks around the room, take a look at, they have a very big job today. All right, awesome. Okay, let me bring you back. If you need any assistance at all, if you require, okay, what sound does a waterfall make? Beautiful, thank you. If you require any assistance exiting the building, just come to one of us. You see our folks standing on the side there. Any SCCOE employee can help exit the building. We have an assembly area in the event of an emergency. We ask that you use these emergency exit doors right here to the right. Maybe you can wave, you're right there, Allie. And you'll exit through these doors. We all must convene at staging area 8. Last year we did this during a drill. So we practiced. This year, same space all the way at the end, the back end of the parking lot there. That's where we'll be meeting. Please, please don't leave in the event of an emergency. We need to account for each and every single one of your precious souls. So please do not leave. Meet us in that area 8 and just really follow one of us. It's the best way to go. We do have emergency devices located on each floor at the south end. The south end of the walkways connecting the north and south buildings, fire extinguishers, AED, and Narcan spray. Okay, so I'm going to introduce somebody very special. She told me not to say anything good about her. I want to first start, she's going to go over the conference app. I want to first start by saying Myra Montanez does exist. She is one person. She's not 7 people. She is going to, literally, this conference happens because of her. She takes care of the food, the presenters, the schedules, the room space, the t-shirts, every single thing that you can think of for this conference, she has touched. So I'd like to first, she's very humble. She didn't want to come up here and speak, but we need everyone's voices to be lit up. So I'd like to first give her a huge round of applause. Myra Montanez, Supervisor of Operations. And she is going to speak. She's going to share with you our conference app. We'll move through it pretty quickly. We have a couple more things, and then we'll go over to our wonderful keynote. Myra.
Thank you, Sandhya. I have a long list of departments and people to thank, but I know we're a little crunched for time. So I apologize for not calling you out, but know that I appreciate all of the help, all of the support, all of the departments, all of the divisions. Thank you so much for bringing this event to life. I just really quickly want to make sure that I talk about the conference app. I'm sure you've received a bunch of emails from me, but I really encourage you to access it. It has everything you need for the conference. It'll have the session agendas, any handouts, resources, maps, everything is here. So you can scan the QR code with your mobile device, or you can access this URL link if you want the web version access. If you just want to unplug today from technology, we do have printed programs available at the information desk. So please feel free to request one if you need one. We do have free Wi-Fi. You can take a picture of this if you need it, but it's also on the back of your badge. We do have continuing education units available. We've partnered with the University of the Pacific. You can find more information about this in the printed program, and in the app has all the information that you need on how to access those. We do kindly request your feedback at the conclusion of the conference. We really do take a look at that feedback and data and make changes. So I would really appreciate it if you could submit that feedback. You will get an email as well as a notification through the app, and it's an easy, simple Google form. So I really encourage you to access it, and you can get points on the conference challenge, which I will talk about. Here it is. So we do have a conference challenge. It's available on the app. All of the challenges should be available now. We have amazing prizes from our sponsors, Lakeshore, Scholastic. All of our sponsors have put together amazing gifts. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, we do actually have them on display by the registration desk. So if you're already playing, you'll see that this is the access code, the challenge code that you can enter in to get some points. And if you've looked through the challenges, there's actually one bonus one in here that I won't call out. So if I were you, I would take a picture of this and maybe reference it later, but there's 2 codes on here. I believe that's all I have for you, so I will give it back to Sonia.
Thanks, Myra. I don't know about you, but I've gone to lots of conferences and I've never had, if I have an issue or a problem, I've emailed the person in charge of a conference and I have never received usually a very quick response. This one emails you back in like 45 seconds. I mean, it's incredible. So just one more round of applause for Myra Montanez. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. Okay. Let me skip through just a bit. Okay, just a couple things that also we'd love for you to visit. If you need a sensory break, like this is too much for me, I need a quick sensory break. We have a sensory path. Maybe you can wave over there, my friends, just right outside of that door. We've created, the Inclusion Collaborative has created a sensory path for you. It's a lot of fun, so come visit. It's going to be there all day, today and tomorrow. Right outside of these doors here, we have a table that's says Corgi on it. Corgi is an easy-to-use suite of digital graphic organizers that support students in developing content-specific practices and habits of mind. It's an absolutely fabulous tool, and there's demos out there. So just take a look, go try it out, see if you might want to use it for your students. Okay, last but not least, we invite you to our 10-year anniversary networking event this evening or late afternoon in the cafeteria. We'll be holding our networking event from 4:30 to about 6. We'll listen to live music performed by the Dream Achievers Band, and a special performance will take place by the Angels on stage. You'll have a chance to enjoy light refreshments. We'll highlight previous conferences. We'll mix and mingle. And then there'll also be an opportunity to win a few prizes, and we'll toast. And it's apple cider, Dr. Dewan, I promise. Dr. Dewan, apple cider. It's today, not the 26th. I just realized, someone pointed out to me I have the wrong date, but it's today. Today is our networking event, 4:30 in the cafeteria. It's a great place to stop by before you might go to a real happy hour later. So come by, celebrate with us. We're very, very excited about it. Our IC team, once more, if we can give them a huge round of applause. This is the absolute best team to work with. They all had a huge part in making this event happen today. It is with great honor that I get to introduce our keynote this morning, Dr. Duncan Andrade. Dr. Duncan Andrade is an urban educator, a researcher, activist, and associate professor of Latina Studies and Race and Resistance at San Francisco State University. He has been ranked as one of the nation's most influential scholars by EdWeek's Public Influence Rankings. His work and methods of teaching have been widely studied and acclaimed for producing uncommon levels of social and academic success for students. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeff Duncan Andrade.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, that sounds about like my high school class. Let's try this again. Hey, it's called call and response. I call, you respond. Good morning, everybody. Okay, that's righteous. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a really, I get to be in a lot of different spaces all over the country that are really trying to seriously engage these conversations. And I just have to say that it's not often that I'm in a space that is talking about the kinds of things that we're going to talk about today, that is celebrating 10 years of doing it. So I want to acknowledge that you're in a place that's running out ahead of the curve. And it's exciting to be in spaces like that because when you're getting further down that journey, you can start pushing harder, right? You have a kind of permission here that other places don't have right now, right? They're asking for permission, they're begging for permission, and in many places around the country right now, they're being told no. Right? Like you can't even use words like social justice or equity, like literally you will be fired. So, as hard as the work is and as challenging as it is to really be true to these commitments every day, I just want to encourage you all to count your blessings, right, for where you are, and to use that opportunity to push hard for the most vulnerable and the most wounded children in our communities. So the talk that I was asked to come do today is based on that book that was just right here, but I guess now it got distributed. Which is my latest book, and the talk precedes the book. And I started doing this talk, probably about 12 years ago when everybody started claiming to be all about equity, right? And so y'all are kind of like very much at the beginning of that when I started, in your 10th year. And I started doing this about 12 years ago because I kept getting called into districts, okay? Like it might've been Santa Clara, it might've been around 12 years ago when I got called in here, districts all over the country, because suddenly everybody was all about equity. So everybody was designing their equity strategic plan, and they were launching their equity office. And so the first thing that I say to folks is that if you have an equity strategic plan, or if you have an equity office, that's how you know you ain't got equity, right? Because equity is not MITA's responsibility, right? It's not the responsibility of one person or one office. Everybody's an equity officer, or nobody's an equity officer, right? And so that's the shift, right, that we're trying to make, to stop locating the equity work as if it's not foundational to everything that we do every day, all the time. So I started doing this talk because when I would go out and be a thought partner with these districts and with these counties and with these states, I kept seeing these two words used interchangeably, like literally used interchangeably in their strategic plan for equity. And so I started doing this talk as a way to really disentangle these two ideas of an equal education system versus an equitable education system. Because I'm clear both from my own 3 decades of practice, but also as a researcher, as a community member, as a father, that equity is the right move. Right? Like if we're really going to be truly deeply committed to building a nation that is a pluralistic, multiracial democracy that is just, then equity is the right move. But if we're going to pivot off of an equal education system to have serious conversations about transitioning and transforming our schools to being equitable, we have to first understand, why are we doing that, right? Why didn't equal education create the kind of society and communities that we want, okay? Because if you just pivot blindly like I've been in education so long, right, that I've seen all this before. It's like, this is the latest, greatest wave. Like, this is going to fix everything. And so everybody's like, yeah, I'm all in for equity. And they don't even know, one, what equity means. And two, they don't even know why they're making that pivot. Okay, so I started doing this talk to both disentangle those two concepts, so we really understand what we're talking about, and so that folks understand that a move from an equal education system to an equitable education system is not a soft pivot. It's a hard pivot. We are talking about a fundamentally different kind of educational paradigm if we're really talking about an equitable educational paradigm. So, Malcolm X famously said that of all the forms of study, the one that's most likely to reward your efforts is the study of history, because the truth is always lying there. Okay, so let's do a quick history lesson on public schools in this nation. So when the public school project starts in the United States, who's invited? Okay, white men. Okay, all white men. Okay, so the children of white men, okay, right? So of property owners, okay, all white male property owners. Okay, so Western European, right? So Eastern folks that we consider white now were not part of the original public school project in the United States. Okay, nor were people of color. Okay, nor were in many places girls or young women. Okay, so when the projects, that's the foundation that you stand on every day when you do the work. Right, that history, right, has not gone away because we haven't torn up that foundation and rebuilt the project. We've just, as David Tyack says, not far from here at Stanford University, he says, we've just been tinkering towards utopia, right? And so the problem with the move towards an equitable system is that we haven't really done the historical understanding about why this project is what it is. Okay, so we're acknowledging this did not start equal in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Okay, so when do we actually start talking about an equal education system? Anybody know? We can date it. Okay, Brown v. Board, right? So when did Brown v. Board happen? 1954. So, okay, so we've only been we're fairly nascent, right, as a nation in our conversation about trying to create equal public education, right? And we all know how that's going, and that's not even particularly complicated, right? Equal is like Sesame Street, right? One for you, one for me, one for you, one for me. That's equal. And we haven't even pulled that off. Right? Everybody, like, worst kept secret in the country. I mean, I'm in the County Office of Education, fine. But we can go outside and just pull up on anybody on the street, random person on the street, and ask them, are schools that serve poor and working class kids and kids of color equal to the schools, public schools, we'll leave privates out of it, public schools, are those schools equal to the public schools that serve wealthy and white kids? And everybody will give you that, hell no, like, get away from me. What kind of question is that, right? So we haven't even done that well. We haven't even done arithmetic. And now we want to switch to calculus. Because equity, right, is much more complex. A much more complex mathematics, right, that we have to do to really make that move. So this idea of these two concepts has become like deeply embedded in my day-to-day existence because I have twin boys. So I have a live experiment in my home about the difference between equality and equity going on every single day. okay? So, and they're pissed about these pictures because they're like, Dad, we don't even look like that anymore. You got to change a bit. They're 10 now, okay? And I keep telling them, no, you look exactly like that. So I'll show you a picture of them in a couple slides so you can judge for yourselves whether that's still how they look. But so for all intents and purposes, these two children are as equal as two children can get, right? They're born in C-section. So literally like baby A comes out, then baby B comes out, separated by 60 seconds, okay? So they're as equal as two children can be, okay? And yet they could not be more different. How many of you in here have multiples? Okay, bless your hearts, okay? Nobody else will really understand the pain I'm about to share with, okay, the room except you, okay? So Amaru, who is the older one, right, by 60 seconds, and he literally lords it over his brother all the time. He's constantly thirsty, okay? So much so that he literally used to carry around a straw and just like try to stick it into things all the time, which was very problematic many times, right? In this case, he hit a jackpot because he got himself a coconut. And Tayari is constantly hungry, so much so that this dude literally stores food on his shirt for later snacking. Still to this day. This is literally the first time we made it out of the house, okay? Do you see how big that child is? Okay. Because when you have multiples, you don't leave the house. People can come visit the zoo, but you're not taking the zoo out for everybody to see, right? So we finally are in a place where we're stable enough, and we're going. We take the kids out, and we're at a place called Lake Merritt. Anybody here from Oakland? Okay, so y'all would know, right? So Lake Merritt is like a popular gathering place in our community. Folks go to hang out there. And so we're out there and we're hanging out, and it's literally the first time out of the house. And so a community member's walking by, I'm like, hey, can you take a picture of this first time we made it out of the house? Takes this picture, hands me back my phone. I'm looking at my phone and I'm like, what the hell is that? And I said, Tayari, come here, son, come here. And Tayari comes over, and that is bark from that tree. So when I tell you that Tayari is constantly hungry, we are literally talking about a dude that takes bark off trees and eats it, okay? So in this context, is this equal? Okay, so now, okay, so we got some yes, and we got some no, and then we got some oh, okay? So we'll get to the oh. Let's start later in a second, but let's start with who says that this is not equal. Okay, so you sat in the front, okay, first victim. So tell me your name. Tell me your name. Joanne. Okay, Joanne, why do you say this is not equal?
Yes, but what the child needs is equal. So you have to give a bottle of water to the child because he'll throw it at you.
Joanne, I asked you, it's a yes/no question. You just is this equal or not? Okay, so now you want to change your answer, right? Classic, right? Teacher move, right? What I meant was, so your problem, Joanne, like mine, right, is that when you look at my babies and I ask you this question, right, you don't answer from here. You answer from here and from here. And so what you did, Joanne, is you changed the question because it's the wrong question, right? You changed, is this equal, to is this fair? And of course, the answer to that question is no, because I just told you, right, about their different needs. But this is absolutely equal. This is the dictionary definition of equality, right? And it's unfair. So if you look up the definition of equality in the dictionary, you'll find that there is no discussion of fairness. It's presumed. and in the most radically unequal and inequitable of any of the modern democracies. It is absurd for us to have a conversation about an equal education system right now, because it ignores both the launching of this nation state, right, and its trajectory over the last few hundred years of continuing to create policy, practice, and institutions that are both unequal and inequitable. Maybe at some point, we get to a discussion as a nation about an equal education system. But this is not that moment. Not until we look ourselves in the mirror and have an honest conversation about where we are as a nation and what it would mean for us to make the rhetoric of a pluralistic, multiracial, just democracy reality for so many of the young people and the families in our society that have been locked out of that for generation after generation after generation. That's them now, okay? So I concede this is just, I don't know, maybe like 2 months ago. So how many of you work in schools or districts that, that say they want to be data-driven? Show of hands. Okay, right. So I hear this all the time, right? All over the country. Part of this equity movement, right, is also folks saying we want to be data-driven and research-based. And I'm like, hallelujah, like that's dope. I want us to be data-driven and research-based. Absolutely. So let's look at some data. Let's look at some data that investigates. Okay, so I'm a social scientist, so I'm not all that great at math. So somebody help me with the math. Brown is 1954. In 1954, the highest policy court in the land, the Supreme Court of the United States, rules that it is law that separate is by definition unequal, that we must racially integrate our nation's public schools. 1954. It is 2023. How many years is that? 70-ish. Also a social scientist. My mathematicians will be like 69 years, 222 days, 7 hours, 2 minutes, and 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7. Okay, so 70 years-ish, okay? Almost 7 decades. Does anybody, let's do a little Price is Right, okay? Does anybody know, okay, how much progress we've made since the Supreme Court said it is illegal to racially segregate schools? How much progress have we made as a nation at racially desegregating schools? Okay, throw out some bids. How much? Negative. You can't bid negative on the Price is Right. They'll kick you off the stage. Because we got 7. Anybody want to, y'all know the deal, $6.50, right? Anybody think it's higher than 7? It's been 70 years. What is it, like 1% a year? Is that 25? Okay, you're actually right. Schools are more racially segregated now than they were before the Supreme Court said that's illegal. And that, y'all, is the value of a policy. We won't policy our way out of these things. It doesn't mean that policy doesn't matter. If you've been teaching as long as I have, and you taught under No Child Left Behind, and you taught before No Child Left Behind, and you taught after No Child Left Behind, you know that that policy impacted, right, our day-to-day lives in the classroom and in schools. So policy does matter. Okay, but policy without attention to the people and the process on the ground is just pomp and circumstance. Okay, so there's a great project run by a guy named Gary Orfield, who for my money is one of the best educational historians in the country. He's currently at UCLA. He was at Harvard for a long time. And when he was at Harvard, he started something called the Harvard Civil Rights Project, which then goes to UCLA. It's now called the UCLA Civil Rights Project. And every year, Gary and his research team, not every year, every 10 years, they do like a meta research project looking at how much progress have we actually made on Brown. Okay, so the 70th anniversary one will be coming out shortly because we're about to hit another 10-year anniversary. But the latest research that they've produced suggests that we've actually gone backwards, right? That we're regressing in our ability to racially desegregate schools. So these equal schools, right, have gotten us a lot of data that I want to look at to really investigate this investment that we've made over the last 70 years in having equal racially desegregated schools. So not long before Arne Duncan leaves office, Arne Duncan, for those of you that don't remember, was the Secretary of Education under Obama. So Secretary of Education is the highest ranking education official in the United States. Okay, so the highest ranking education official in the United States is all over national media just before he leaves office, lauding himself and the Obama administration for having created the highest ever high school graduation rate in the history of the United States. And at the time, I was teaching high school English literature at Fremont High School in Deep East Oakland, that's my neighborhood high school. It's where my sons will naturally matriculate to. And it's also one of the 20 lowest performing high schools in the state. Okay, so I'm having this moment of cognitive dissonance because the highest ranking education official is telling me we're doing better than ever, and I'm going to work every day in my community feeling like we're doing worse than ever. And so one of my other problems is that I'm a researcher, which means that I've been trained in how to collect data, I've been trained in how to analyze data, and I've been trained in how to present data. And so this, right, was the map that Arne produced, right? And actually, it's not. This is a re-rendition of the map because we took his data, right? This stuff that was getting all over the national consciousness, and all we did was control for one thing. We controlled for income. We didn't even look at race, okay? So this was the high school graduation map for non-low income students. And it probably doesn't shock anybody, right? That across the nation, right, those kids are doing fairly well, question mark, right? I even want to challenge this, right? Especially given all the data that we're now getting, and this is particularly relevant to your community because Facebook is now being sued by 36 states it's not Facebook, what is it? Right, okay, so Meta is now being sued by 36 states, right, for being intentional direct contributors to the poor mental health of teenagers and children because of the way that they designed Instagram and the way that they designed Facebook, right? And the algorithm that they built was deliberately designed to give children dopamine hits. And so they're now being sued, right, for having created what public health officials are calling the largest mental health crisis children in the United States have ever experienced since they've started tracking mental health, right? In the last 10 years, the depression rate for teenagers in the United States has doubled. Sure, let's throw them in there too. Let's get them all, right? The point is, right, that our young people are in crisis, right? So even though, right, our data might suggest, right, they're getting good grades, right, they've got better attendance, right? What we know on the ground, right, is that this data is incomplete, right? So I don't even want to necessarily celebrate this because I want us to challenge, are our kids that are doing well really doing well? Okay, so this, however, is the high school graduation map for low-income students. This is the high school graduation map for the group of children that can least afford to be failing in school. And they are failing in school coast to coast, edge to edge, top to bottom, tip to finish, a total train wreck. And I know what y'all are thinking. Texas? Okay, so short answer is Texas cheats. Okay. So no, but that's actually true. True. So if y'all remember, the Secretary of Education under Bush, was the former Secretary of Education in Texas, and they attributed what became known as a Texas miracle to him, right? Because Texas had the highest test score gains over the course of a year under his leadership. And does anybody remember how he did it? Buses. So there was an investigative reporter, right, who heard about the Texas miracle, and this reporter was like, okay, A, there's no such thing as miracles, and B, there's definitely no miracles in educational testing. So he started digging around, and what he found out was that this Secretary of Education had given additional fundings, kind of like, one-time COVID funding, right? So one-time, right, funding to a bunch of these districts that had large numbers of language learners. And on the day of the test, that money was to be used to load those kids onto buses and take them to amusement parks. And their test scores went through the roof. Okay? And so he became Secretary of Education for the country, right? And then got exposed and had to walk away gracefully from the position. That's why Texas is green. Okay. And then I was in Kentucky. And this guy was like, what about Kentucky? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know how Kentucky does it. So we also have the largest income gap in the world. And not only are we the global champs at wealth inequality, we're the historical global champs at wealth inequality. No nation state has ever had a bigger gap between its wealthy and its poor and working class than we currently have. And it's trending the wrong way. The gap is growing. So we've had 70 years of an equal education system that has produced the most unequal wealth distribution of any of the industrialized democracies in the world ever. This is our national incarceration data. Okay, so we're not only the global champs at wealth inequality, we're also the global champs at locking up our own citizens. No nation state locks up more of its citizens per capita than we do. Russia is a distant second. Okay, there's a great website put out by Mother Jones called Debt to Society that tracks prison rates and investments all over the world, if you care to see how we continue to be the global champs. So I was like, so what is the right data? So in the process of going through all this research and putting this talk together and putting the book together, I started meeting with people from all kinds of different disciplines, right? Legal scholars to really try to understand Brown and why it hasn't had the impact it's supposed to have, political scientists, economists, social epidemiologists, public health officials, neuroscientists. And I was asking all these folks, like, what is the metric that we can look at? Like, what's the global gold standard for measuring the kinds of things that we say we want as a nation? What's the global gold standard for measuring democracy and peace and economic stability and sustainability in societies? And all of them sent me here, the Global Peace Index. Okay, so this was the first year, right, that I started really looking at data to understand, right, what is the impact of this education system we've built on the actual well-being of the nation. And so the Global Peace Index is like any index, right? It's got some things in there that maybe don't need to be in there. It's probably, this is global gold standard for measuring peace, democracy, economic sustainability, and growth in 99.8% of the world's population. It's used by UNESCO. It's used by the United Nations. It's used by the World Health Organization. Okay, this is the data set. Okay, and so I started looking at it in 2015. And every time I show this slide, what's happening right now happens, which is everybody stops looking at me and they start looking at the rankings, because the US is obsessed with rankings. And it's like, where are we? Right? And it's like, no, we didn't make the top 15. We were 94th. Yeah, and I was like, damn, we're the Raiders. Hey. Real Raider fans know how to look in the mirror and just tell the truth, okay? And it's just part of being a Raider fan, all right? That's right, okay? So I'm like, we're not even sniffing the playoffs. We're 94th, right? We've been screwing up our draft picks over and over and over. What are we going to do, right? And so then I'm like, okay, but maybe this is like, and this is classic Raider fandom, right? Next year, right? This just wasn't our year, but next year, okay? And so next year, right? I kept next yearing. By 2020, we were down to 121st. 2021, we were down 122nd. 2022, down to 129th. And I was doing this talk a few weeks ago, right? And this guy's like, what about 2023? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it's out yet. And he goes, it is. We're 131 now. So that, if you know anything about data, would be called a trend. We're trending, right? Radically the wrong way. And I just want you to look now at the rankings and look at some of the nations that are just above us. See, now this is really hard, right, for folks like me and probably for many of the folks in this room to wrap our heads around, because none of us in this room live at 129. Most of us, right, in this room live somewhere around 20, 25, right, depending on, right, how many years, right, you've been in the game, right, maybe you're 30, 35, okay, but none of us live at 129. And if this room's average is, let's say, 28 or 30, and the national average is 129, what does that tell you about where the most vulnerable and wounded children are living? Where are they? They're even lower than 129. How many of you are familiar with the work of Bryan Stevenson? Anybody know who he is? Okay, just a couple of you. So I'm going to give you a lot of reading, okay? You can take it or leave it, but at least leave with the list, okay? So Bryan Stevenson, Bryan is with the Y, Stevenson's with a V. He's arguably the best known death row lawyer in the United States. He wrote a book called Just Mercy, which got a lot of acclaim, and then it became a Hollywood film. Anyway, I shared the stage with Bryan a few years ago, and something he said to me really stuck with me when I look at this kind of data. And when I think about the work that we're trying to do in our community and that I'm trying to be a part of around this country. And what Bryan said is, he said, look, the problem with the pursuit and the achievement of justice and democracy and freedom in our nation is not that we don't have a bunch of really smart, talented, committed people banging on it every day. This room is filled with them. He says the problem is that so many of us that are doing this work, hey, when we get together and we think about we think about that graduation map. We think about, right, the woundedness of, we think about the terrible mental health of so many of our young people, and we're like, we've got to do something about this. And we start putting the best of our thinking together around how are we going to do that. And we come up with the absolute best ideas that we have. And he says, the problem is that these ideas that we come up with, that we then go implement, right, in our schools, with our children, with our families, with our teachers. He says, what we effectively come up with is aspirin. And he says, the thing about aspirin is it will temporarily relieve the symptoms of a headache, but it will not stop you from getting headaches. And so the headaches keep coming back, right? The woundedness keeps coming back because, and he says, the problem is that when we design our solutions, we design them from 30. We design them from our worldview. And we need to be designing solutions for 140. And he says the only way that that's going to happen is if we start being committed to getting proximity to the pain. And he says, and when you get proximate to the pain you're actually trying to resolve, you have to humble up and hush up. You have to know that the people that know best what is needed at 140 are the people that are living at 140. And we keep trying to build schools in our own vision for ourselves, what we want for kids, instead of really trying to understand, right, what the most vulnerable and the most wounded children and families actually need. And then, right, rethinking, redesigning, reformatting, transforming our school environments, our classrooms, our climate, our culture, our school day, our hiring, our budgeting to actually reflect the data. To get here from my home in East Oakland, I had to use this. Okay, and I use Waze, right? Maybe you're a Google Maps freak, I don't know, right? But I'm a Wazer, okay? So I to get from my house to here, what did I have to put into Waze? An address, okay? Which Waze reads as what? Waze reads that as data. Okay, so let's say I put the wrong address in. What would have happened? Somebody else would be up here, right, faking it till they make it, right? And I'd be off somewhere else, right, in the county trying to find the county office of education. But I couldn't get mad at Waze for that. That's user error. That's the data I put in. Okay, so it's not about being data driven. It's about being driven by the right data. And if you keep ending up in the same wrong spot with the same child, the same family, the same group of students, change the data you're looking at. Because when you change the data you look at, it changes the questions you ask. And when you change the questions you ask, it changes the answers you come up with. And if that data still leads you to the wrong place with that child or that family or that community, then what do you know? It's still the wrong data. Okay, but we keep looking, we keep staring at the exact same data year over year over year, and then expecting ourselves to come up with some transformative solution to change that data, right? But when we start changing and start looking at this kind of data, it begins to force us to ask a different set of questions about what kind of curriculum do we need, right? What kind of pedagogy do we need? What kind of climate and culture do we need in the school? Because it has to respond to 140, not to 50th percentile on the literacy metric. Now, fortunately, we have examples in history of times when this has happened. So I'm going to give you one example here from London, England, circa 1854. And around this period, there is talk of total collapse of the city. They were literally talking about shutting London down. And as a last-ditch effort to save the city, because cholera was just sweeping uncontrollably through the city, they could not get their arms around it. And so, as a last-ditch effort to save the city officials sequestered the leading medical minds in London. And they put them in a room, okay, sat them around a table, and said, y'all are not, well, they probably didn't say y'all, but whatever you would say if you were British. Okay, they said, y'all are not coming out of here until you have a solution for cholera. So all these like top medical minds in the city are knocking around all these ideas. And eventually one of them raises his hand and he says, this is absurd. And he said, well, what do you mean? And he says, every single solution we're coming up with for cholera defaults us to cholera. And he said, yeah. He said, I didn't sign up to be a medical doctor to learn how to live with sickness. I signed up to be a medical doctor to learn how to create the conditions of wellness. And then they said to him what I hear said to teachers and families and kids and school leaders and superintendents all the time that are talking not about tinkering, but about transforming, fundamentally changing the basic project, the answer of for what? Why do we take children from their families by law for 13 consecutive years for 7 hours a day in this nation? Why are we doing it? Is it really for college and career pathways? Is it really so that they can get into the 90th percentile? Is that really what the project's about? Because if it is, carry on. And watch our children continue to suffer. Watch our children to continue to narrate back to us, this shit doesn't work for me. I'm not happy here. I don't love myself. Right? How many different ways do they have to tell us? Where are these young kids that are shooters going? They're not going to the park. They're going to the schoolhouse and lighting it up. They're literally lighting off sticks of dynamite, and we're talking about fucking test scores. At what point do we see our own moral bankruptcy in this conversation? And so this doctor's saying that to the top medical minds, right? And they're telling him, you're not being realistic, right? You gotta work with the system. And he says, if that's what it means to be part of your medical association, I don't want to be part of your medical association. And they said, cool. And they showed him the door. This doctor's name is John Snow. No, not that John Snow. That John Snow. So John Snow leaves the meeting of the top medical minds in all of London, and he hits the streets. And he becomes an ethnographer of the community that he serves. And he gets proximity to the pain, and he starts collecting data. And what John Snow finds in his data is a researcher's dream. He finds causal, a perfect binary in the data. And what John Snow found was that every single person in London that had cholera drank from that water fountain. And every single person that didn't. And so John Snow got a saw, and he cut off the handle, and cholera stopped. Stop drinking from the poison well of an equal education system in the most radically unequal of any of the industrialized democracies in the world. Okay? It is literally making us sick. Equity, however, right, begins to actually become the saw. Because in an equitable system, if you're hungry, you get food. If you're thirsty, you get water. If you're hella thirsty, you get hella water. Because in an equitable system, you get what you need when you need it. And it's this part that's so challenging in the work, right? We get this, right? We get that Tayari's hungry and that Amaru's thirsty, right? But we only get that if we actually spend time asking Amaru and Tayari what they need instead of telling them what we're going to do to them, right? That's why John Snow's research was so powerful, because he wasn't looking at a graph, right? He was actually down with proximity to the pain. He was at 142, right? He knew that that's where the solutions were. This is the challenge, though, right? Is because schools are built by design to be highly conservative and very bureaucratic. And so, but to meet needs, particularly for the most vulnerable and wounded ones, you have to be dynamic. I mean, you've got to be able to pivot on a dime quickly, right? And schools, right, are very resistant to that. So that may be one of the biggest challenges that you have to meet to truly deliver on the promise of equity, right? Is how to create a more dynamic environment that can move more quickly and not subject the child to waiting, because the vulnerable and the wounded ones, right? They can't wait, right? They're lighting off dynamite because they've been asking, and we've been ignoring. And when we finally see them, the desk is flipped over, okay? And now they're a problem. Okay? Instead of saying, no, the problem is that so many folks around them were deaf. And so they had to scream louder and louder and louder, and now we're pissed that they're screaming. But we've known this since 1943. Now schools want to be research-based. Okay, cool. I think that's great. I will stake my career on this statement. There is nothing being used in any school that is represented that has the research base of Maslow. Nothing. Maslow releases the hierarchy of needs in 1943. Study after study after study, cross-disciplinary, social epidemiology, public health, neuroscience, neurobiology, pediatrics, physiology, all clearly suggest Maslow's on it. So when we get stuck, okay, with young people, when we get stuck with families, right? If you lean into the bureaucracy, you will do institutional work, right? If you lean into their humanity, you will do sacred work. And to do the sacred work, right, you've got to deal with, hey, what it is that every human being needs. And you just go base up. There's your checklist, right? That you start here and work up, because we know with absolute certainty, right? In the neuroscience, in the medicine, and what pisses me off is that our elders and our ancestors have been saying this since we had contact with the colonists, since they started forcing us to send our children to your schools. We've been saying this, we've been saying this, we've been saying this, and now Western science has proved it. And so suddenly it's true. So fine, take your pick, right? If you need hard science to prove to you that this is what children need, there's tons of it. Okay? Or you can just listen to their grandma, right? Because they're saying the same things. So the other good thing for us as educators is we have about 4 decades of research on what it looks like when practitioners create spaces that deliver on this. Okay, 4 decades. And this is really rare in research. It is incredibly rare to see a set of conclusions repeating themselves for that long. And what we see in the research of the most effective practitioners, no matter who they're serving, that's what they do. No matter what the policy drive of the day is, right? At the end of the day, they boil their work with young people and families down to these 3 things: relationships, relevance, and responsibility. And there is boatloads of research on why these things matter so much. And that's what we're going to do in the second half of the talk, is to just armor you up. Because I've been in so many schools in my career where these things, well supported by the research, well supported by the data, are frowned upon, right? And so I want to armor you, because you're going to have to battle, right? We said everybody's an equity officer and nobody's an equity officer. And part of being an equity officer is you're going to have to do battle on behalf of the most vulnerable and the most wounded ones sometimes. So before I get into those, though, hey, I want to do a little more with Maslow, okay? Because I have problems with Maslow. And the problem that I have with Maslow, hey, is that not that he's necessarily wrong, right? But that his purposeful design of the hierarchy of needs is problematic. Okay? And it very much aligns with the way we operate in schools. Okay? So this is an individual model of wellness, right? And what it presumes is that you can be well, okay, while they are not. Okay? And that's very much the way we operate in schools, right? You can get A's, right, while they do not. And you're excellent, and the problem is theirs, and we're all good. Okay? So this model of achievement, this model of rugged individualism that is normed over and over just in the way we design schools, has to be disrupted if we're really going to create well environments where all children are able to thrive. But hey, I don't want to just throw Maslow out, right? Because there's a lot of merit to Maslow. And as I said, there's a ton of research that suggests that he's really on the button around some of this stuff. Okay, so what I want to practice right now is one of the things that I've been taught by my indigenous elder. I come from the Opata people, hey, which connects me to Mexicayo and Mayan traditions. And a lot of the medicine people in my life, right, my elders have taught me about the importance of mixing medicines. Okay, my mother's 94, right? And one of her favorite teachings from me, I'm the baby, I'm the youngest of 7. So I got these teachings over and over and over again, including now. Okay. But my mom always used to say, boy, take the best and leave the rest, right? So there's something in here for all of us, right? And I want you to think about how to mix these medicines in a way that's really reflective of your 140s, okay? Those babies that, right, really need you to do something fundamentally different. All right, so let's look at these side by side real quick. All right, so first thing for you to notice, right, is what is Maslow's pinnacle? Where is that in the indigenous model of wellness? Okay, so I left out an important piece here. So this is actually Maslow, right? And that is Maslow on the Blackfeet Reservation. Because when Maslow and all this history about Maslow gets expunged by the academy, right? This is why Malcolm X said, of all the forms of study, history. Okay? So if you look at the history of Maslow, what you'll find is he's a newly minted PhD. And he's got this idea for a hierarchy of needs for human beings. That is not it. Maslow's original idea was that what the hierarchy of human needs is about dominance and competition. And that's what human beings need to self-actualize. That was his original model, right? And then he brings that to this collaborative, right? And fortunately, right, he met a senior scholar there that was a woman that was like, you're dumb. Okay? But I'm going to give you a shot to redeem yourself. So I'm going to send you, right, to a place, right, where I want you to take your model, and then I want you to see, right, how does that experience, right, inform your model? So he goes to the Blackfeet Reservation, right, spends months there. This is him on the res, right, with Blackfeet people, and then comes out of that completely transformed. And that's where that comes from, right? It's an appropriation of the indigenous model. So Maslow learned this model, right, from the Blackfeet people. And this is called the breath of life, right? This is their model of sustainability and wellness for the community, right? So we're going to talk about the differences between these, right, and the ways in which we can mix these medicines to create something that is actually responsive to what our communities need, right? So back to the earlier point, self-actualization is the pinnacle in Maslow. Where is it in the indigenous model? Why? What about like self-esteem, love and belonging, safety, security, physiological, like food, clothing, shelter? Why does the indigenous model leave those out? Okay. Because duh, you have to say you're going to feed the children. You have to say you're going to clothe the children. You have to say you're going to make communities safer. You have to say you're going to teach children to love themselves, love their ancestors, love the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, the language they speak, the community they come from. Yeah. In this society, you actually need to say that shit. We're that sick. Right? And so they're teaching this to Maslow in 1943. And Maslow is saying in 1943, this society is so sick right now that you actually do have to say those things. You work in spaces, you live in a state, you live in a community where you have to say those things. But think about these, okay? Think about self-actualization as the starting point with our babies. But you got to do a lot of backfilling because there's all kinds of cracks in the foundation and because of the ways, the spaces, the places in which we've been raising our children, right? And we got to fill in those foundational cracks for them to be solid here. We know with absolute certainty in the medical research, in the neuroscience, and in the wisdom of the ancestors and the elders, right, that you cannot consistently self-actualize without these things being consistently stable. You just can't, right? It's a biological fact. Okay. And it doesn't have anything to do with the color of your skin or how many books your parents read you when you were 2, right? Or how many degrees I mean, do those things matter? Sure, they do, right? But at the end of the day, we know that if you take my sons, right, with all the resources that I'm able to give them, right, and you make them feel unsafe, right? They're missing meals. Guess how they're going to do in school? But their dad has a PhD. Right? Their dad flies all over the country and does lectures. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's a biological imperative that these things are stable in human beings in order for them to be who they naturally are. This is so important for us to understand. You don't have to fix kids. They're not broken. The systems in which they're living are broken. We keep trying. My mom, 94-year-old wisdom, favorite saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, son. But we keep trying to fix the wrong things because we're looking at the wrong data. We keep trying to fix their reading scores instead of fixing the foundation on which we're teaching them reading. So Maslow, right, acknowledges all this, right? We need to acknowledge all this as best as we can. Okay. Now I know you're not going to go out and build housing, right? You're not, but considering the ways in which all of that interrupts how a child shows up is critically important to creating the kind of environment where the child can show up. So this is where, okay, I want us to push ourselves, because if we stop there, then a test score is what we're seeking. 4-year college entrance is what we're seeking. Okay? And that shouldn't be what we're seeking. That's a nice ancillary benefit if they choose to make those moves, right? But speaking about my own sons, okay, to completely frankly, I don't give a shit what their reading scores are if they don't love themselves. Okay? But we don't measure self-love in schools. Angela Duckworth, y'all know who Angela Duckworth is? Okay, she's a close colleague of mine. We don't agree on shit, okay? We constantly, right? But I love Angela because she'll like really wrestle with this stuff, right? So those of you who don't know Angela Duckworth, right? She's famous because she won the MacArthur Award, right? But she wrote this book called Grit, right? And that was the problem, right? Is that our kids don't have grit. And I was like, have you come to East Oakland, okay? I'm just gonna drop you off. I'm gonna walk away, right? And I'm gonna see if you have the grit to find my house. Okay, so anyway, Angela's great though, because she's like seriously like wrestles with these things, right? So anyway, Angela told me once, she said, we measure what we treasure. And kids know it. So kids know, like we don't treasure their well-being. We treasure their reading score. Okay, so it's just lip service unless it's not. Okay, if we really treasure it, and when we get into some of the Q&A in the breakout session, I can talk about how our community has been trying to respond to this challenge for schools because we don't have good metrics in schools to measure these things down to the student level, right? So we got the Healthy Kids Survey, right? But that's aggregate, right? I need to know how the most wounded one is doing and whether or not the things I'm doing for them are moving the meter on these things. And without having a wellness score for a child, I don't have good data on how those moves I'm making. So I'm guessing all the time, right? So one step further though, what I want us thinking about is self-actualization for what? I want this child to show up and read for what? And back to my sons, right? Why do I want my sons to read? So they can go to college? No. Like they'll go to college or they won't go to college. I want my sons to read so they can learn about themselves and their ancestors, because they know the more they know about themselves, the easier it is for them to connect to others and find meaning in those relationships that might come from different places or have different cultural backgrounds or speak different languages. But without really loving themselves, they can't love anybody else. right? That's why I want my sons to read. That's why I want my sons to write, because I don't want anybody else to write my son's story for them. I want them to write their own story. And if you can't read and you can't write, someone else will write your story for you, and it will become true. Because self-actualization is about what you can do for the community. Right? That's a very different achievement model than what we have in schools. So I remember I was in a third grade classroom. This was before the pandemic. And I was in this school, right? And this school was like all about this stuff that we're talking about, right? They had all the right posts. They had like Che up, and you know, Malcolm, and all these amazing, right, people who have Harriet Tubman, right? And the school used this language like they were a family, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, it's a family. That's dope. That's dope, right? And we're a community. Oh, that's you're a community school. And like, yeah, we're a community school, right? We've got a food bank. We got a health clinic. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's what's up. And they're like, okay, can I see some classrooms? Like, yeah, come on. Come see how our families work in the classroom. I go into this third grade classroom, and it's a family. And the kids are like, yeah, we're a family. I'm like, okay, that's what's up. I go, what's the name of your family? Like, we're yellow. I was like, all right. And then this kid, right, we're the red family, right? We're the blue family. We're the brown family. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what's up. That's what's up. You know, you gotta have something with third graders, right? Something that makes a little sense to them. I'm like, okay, that's what's up. And they were really advanced in their pedagogy because they were working in groups. You heard about that? Like group work, right? Yeah, it's a big pedagogical breakthrough for us, right, in our field. So they were in groups. So they had desks, right? But they faced each other. Okay, so this was a little family of four, okay, nice and balanced, okay, and I'm like, okay, that's what's up, and then the teacher announces that it's time for the spelling test. I'm like, okay, let me see how the family does spelling. So I'm watching, right, and then the kids they go in their desk, and they pull out. But you know what they pulled out? What? They put out, yeah, the divide, I call them dividers. Yeah, because we're family, right? And you gotta protect your CAT. So all the dividers go up, right? Now I'm watching, right, these little 8-year-olds. And so now they're all like, now the families, like, I guess they're in their own rooms. Okay. 4 people, 4-bedroom house, right? They're doing good, right? And so then the table I'm right next to, I'm watching, and I already knew, right? Like I've been teaching long enough, right? And in the community long enough I already know when I walk in the room, right? Who the wounded ones are, right? So there's little wounded homies right here, right? And there's little other homies sitting here, and then the teacher's like, I don't remember the words, so we'll just play along with me. And the teacher's like, yeah. And then the little homie right here, who's an ace speller, right, is like, right? And I'm watching, look, this little homie, the wounded one, right? And you know the creep? You know the creep? This one?
Yep.
You're just trying to get a little peek, maybe one letter, just a lead, right? Starts trying to creep around the divider, right? Because little homie does not know how to spell cat. And then dog, right? And then you know when the creep, you forget people are actually watching you, and the creep gets bigger and bigger, right? And then you're in like the full lean, right? And this little homie right here does this. And teacher didn't say anything. Why would they do that? What do they believe happens if they're like, what, you don't know how to spell? Bam, knock my divider down. Cat, C-A-T, homie. Dog, D-O-G, homie. Not giving it to them, right? But understanding their responsibility to actualize the community. You know how to spell, the homie doesn't. You can't get an A unless they get an A, because then you're hoarding, right? Then you're creating wealth disparity, right, in spelling. But Why does an 8-year-old do that? Was so deep to me. It's already coded in, because if they do that, what are they? It's cheating. It's cheating, right? We've normed that, right? Those distant relationships. And what folks don't get that aren't from the block is that the next word is bat. And you held bat from me. So when we get back to the block, I'm going to teach you about bat. Because there's all kinds of schools. And you might have this one locked down, but you're going to need me on the block. And schools are literally creating tension in our communities because of the divisive culture around achievement and who's deserving and who's not deserving, that we have to begin to question, for what? Why are we teaching bat, cat, and hat if not to improve the community? Why are we teaching, right, social responsibility if not to share what we know and understand, that it's all of us or none of us? Why isn't that the core thing that we're measuring? That's the indigenous model. You self-actualize so that your community can become more well. That's your responsibility. Okay? And to not do that is to cheat. To not share is to cheat the community, to cheat your ancestors, to cheat the teachings that we're giving you. And community actualization for the top one's probably really blurry. Can anybody read it? Cultural perpetuity. Okay, so this is the last piece of this mixing of medicines teaching for this slide. What is the shape that Maslow has used to show the hierarchy? Okay, a triangle. Okay, and what is this shape? Okay, it's a teepee, right? And geometrically, like the difference, the one difference that's very visible is super important for understanding this concept. The teepee, okay, the pyramid or the triangle, what does it look like at the top? It's closed, because this is a model of individual wellness. It doesn't need to go beyond you. It's your grade, it's your test score, it's your college and career pathway. It's all about you. Okay? But in the indigenous model, okay, it's a teepee because the teepee's open at the top. And why is the teepee open at the top? Okay, because of interdependence, right? It's metaphorical, but in real talk, right? If you've ever been in a sweat, right? Why is it open? So the smoke can go out, right? So where does the smoke go when it goes out? What's this? Like literally, it's not a trick question. Okay, where does it go? Okay, it goes up. Okay, where? In the sky. Okay, right? Good, good. We're doing good. Okay, in the sky, right? And then right, and into the atmosphere, right? And then where does it go? It comes back down in the rain. Right? And when it comes back down, where does it go? It goes back to the base for the next generation. When we talk about cultural perpetuity, right? Look, all of you are indigenous to somewhere. Okay? You just probably ain't indigenous to here. Okay? But you're indigenous to somewhere. And if you track back your own indigeneity, I promise you that you will find that your people have a principle just like mine. And we have what's called a 7 generations principle. Right? And there's lots of different teachings of the 7 generations. There's not one right one or true one, right? It just depends on who your elders are and how they've taught you, right? So my elders have taught me that I am part of a 7 generations principle, so that everything I do in any given moment is an echoing forward of the best of 7 generations of my ancestors. And they tell me that is how powerful you are, son, right? Because you have 7 generations of ancestors putting wind at your back. And everything you do in any given moment, son, will echo forward 7 generations. That's how seriously I take every interaction with children. Because I think sometimes we just are trying to get through the day and not understanding that every interaction, right, in the teachings of our ancestors doesn't go away. They don't reset the next day. Right? It lives in them and then lives in their children, and then by extension, and we now have clear medical evidence about this. We know that trauma gets passed generationally, right? Exposure to toxic stress and trauma over time literally alters your DNA. We now have clear medical evidence about this. which means what? For the children of young people that grow into adults that experience trauma. If their DNA is altered, what happens when you have children? So we now have clear medical genetic evidence that trauma is passed generationally. So unhealed trauma, right, becomes multi-generational. And so we've had sayings about this for a long time, right? We say hurt people. Okay, but I want you to work the other side as educators. Hurt people do hurt people. But what's the other half of the statement that we never say in this country? Healed people heal people, right? This is why us understanding our responsibility as medicine people and understanding that all of our children are medicine people, everyone, okay, is a medicine person. That's not the question. The question is, are we creating environments where we get to mix medicines as our path to education? So in the indigenous model, right, the idea of cultural perpetuity is that you self-actualize so your community can self-actualize, and out of that actualization is going to come all kinds of lessons, right? Painful ones and beautiful ones. And those must go out and come back to the next generation. And we don't do that in schools. We don't teach the truth. We don't teach that we are the only industrialized nation in the history of the world to have committed 2 genocides. The genocide against African people and the genocide against Western indigenous people. And because we don't tell that truth, the pain, the trauma, and the suffering from those genocides persists. If we want to end that, we have to tell the truth. We don't have to solve it. It's not solvable. It's just true, right? And if young people can begin to hear the truth, right, then they can begin to use the medicine to heal. And those teachings will come back to the next generation. The only way that we're going to disrupt this is if we tell the truth. And if we don't tell the truth, it won't come back to the next generation and they'll repeat. Okay? So it's not just about cultural perpetuity, it's not just passing on the best, right? It's passing on all the lessons so that the next generation doesn't have to learn the same lessons we've been learning. And this begins with the way in which we form relationships. Relationships for what? So that you'll be compliant, right? So that you'll be the apple of my eye, so that you do all the homework, right? Or is it about this deeper connection around self-actualization, community actualization, and cultural perpetuity? So one of the best books that I've seen on talking about relationships, particularly with wounded and vulnerable ones, is Herb Cole's work. Okay, and Herb coined a term called willed not learning. Because at the time when Herb was doing this research, a lot of the educational research was focused on high achievers, right? This was all the rage in the research community, that everyone wanted to study high achievers and then figure out how do we get other kids to mimic their behaviors, because you wanted everybody to be high achievers. And Herb was like, well, I'm actually more interested in the kids who come to school every day and don't do anything. Right? So how many of you have ever had a student in your class where it's like they are there like every day, and then you get to the marking period and you look at the grade book, it's like a straight zeros, right? You ever have that kid? Okay, so Herb says that's your most committed learner. Because think about that. Think about the discipline it takes to come every single day, right, and not learn shit, right? That's some serious commitment, right? And all of us practice this in our lives, right? So you do this with your partner when you're pissed off at your partner, right? And they're trying to teach you something, and you're there, but you ain't there, right? It's a natural biological reaction to woundedness, right? That you check out, right? And so Herb became really interested in teachers understanding this behavior as not laziness, but as an actual conscious effort to not learn from school because they don't trust school. They don't trust power. They don't trust authority, right? That's what you learn when you get wounded, right? Is you learn to protect yourself. You learn to truly learning, like what we're talking about, is an act of vulnerability. The teacher has to be vulnerable. The young person has to be vulnerable. For wounded children, right, that is a real biological challenge. because when I've been vulnerable before, people with power have hurt me. And so they'll resist, right? And so one of the most famous quotes from the book is actually from a kid. And the kid says to Herb, he says, Herb, I don't care what you know until I know that you care. And there is now tons of research, right, about why caring relationships, loving relationships, connected relationships matter so much. And the more wounded you are, the more they matter. Okay, so Robert Sapolsky, who actually, anybody in here read the LA Times? Okay, so there was just a big story, right, on his latest book. I love Robert because he's super quirky. He's arguably the best known or one of the best known neuroscientists in the world. He runs a neurobiology lab at Stanford. His book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, completely changed the conversation in the medical field about stress. Okay, and in the Q&A, we can talk about why zebras don't get ulcers. I'm not going to go into it right now. But this book, just fair warning, this book is about 600 pages at 6-point font. Okay, so unless you like super nerd out on neuroscience, which I do, okay, but if you don't, it's okay because there's a film. Okay, this 45-minute documentary film available on most streaming services, put out by National Geographic, is a beautiful kind of historical investigation of Sapolsky's work that leads to the entire medical field changing its understanding about stress and how it affects the body. Oop. No, it's right here. This is the title, Stress, Portrait of a Killer. And if any of y'all want these slides, they'll be shared with you too. So if you miss some stuff or whatever, or it doesn't come out, if you take a photo, totally cool. I'll share the slides with you. So Brene Brown. Hey, how many people are familiar with Brene? Yeah, she's all the rage, right? She's Brene, hey, because she did a TED Talk, right? And I did a TED Talk, and TED Talks are cool, right? But TED Talks worry me, because they take these really complex things and they introduce them to people in 12 to 14 minutes, and then suddenly everybody's a neuroscientist, right? Or it's like, oh, you're like, I know all about trauma. Like, I'm gonna go heal all the trauma, right? And so just be careful, right? Like, I think TED Talks are dope because they do allow us to be introduced some really complex and amazing ideas, right? But then if you're like, I'm feeling that, then go read the book. Right? Do the deep dive, particularly if you're going to try and move it into your practice. Okay. So her book, Daring Greatly, really spreads out, right, on these early ideas, right? And where Brene's big contribution to the field, and many contributions, but the one that I want to highlight for us as educators is that she also disentangled two things that oftentimes get talked as if they're the same. Okay, and those two things were empathy and sympathy, right? And her research helped us to understand that they are not the same thing. So what's sympathy? What does it mean to have a sympathetic reaction to somebody? Right, you feel sorry for them, okay? And does anybody know what the neuroscience shows us, right? The physiology shows us about what happens because this is what I want us to start understanding. Okay, we now have so much information about what goes on inside the body. And so what we're often doing as educators is we're reading the physical affect of a child. And oftentimes, or even like our colleagues, right? And oftentimes the physical affect masks what's really going on inside, right? So we've got to learn how to read different cues that are indicators of what's actually going on in their neural pathways and what's actually going on biochemically for them. So biochemically, what happens when you feel sorry for somebody? Anybody know? What goes on inside your body? But I'm talking about biochemically, right? What does pity do to your body biochemically, neurobiologically? Nothing. Okay. Sympathy, right? There is no measurable biochemical change in your body when you feel sorry for someone. In fact, feeling sorry for someone often creates social distance, right? Like, sucks to be you, like, let me not get all up in that mess, right? What's empathy? Right. When you feel somebody, right? And how many of you have young people that say, I feel you, dog. I feel you. I feel you. Right. They're articulating, right? An empathic connection. What happens to you biochemically when you feel an empathic response to somebody? Your heart responds, right? Your biochemistry literally changes when you feel empathy for somebody. Okay, you release a chemical in your body called oxytocin. Okay, and oxytocin is known as the happy drug. Oxytocin is really good. Oxytocin, like dopamine, right? That they make your body feel really good, right? And it's because of the connection that your body releases. This is why, right, if you're not afraid of dogs, one of the best things you can do for your body is to pet a dog. And it will literally release, right, oxytocin in your body and in the dog's body, right? Brene, right, begins to help us understand and the difference between these two things. And so what I want us thinking about educators is, which kids do I feel sorry for? Which kids do I have a sympathetic reaction to? And which kids do I have an empathic connection with? Okay, and the key to empathy, this is the number one key that we find in the research. The key to forming empathic relationships is shared vulnerability. That's what leads to empathy. Okay, and so if we're never vulnerable as adults, we can never have true empathetic connections to the young people that we're trying to build with. And the list goes on, including our own Surgeon General, right? Who did a lot of work in community with wounded and vulnerable youth not far from here in San Francisco. Nadine Burke, right? Her book, The Deepest Well, explores, right, a lot of that work that she did with young people in Hunters Point in San Francisco. So for a couple of these, what I'm going to do to kind of firm this up in your mind, because I've been in enough of these talks where it's like, you get, you know, these great, everything works on the whiteboard, right? But on the ground, it's messy, right? And the meaning's in the mess. Don't resent the messiness, right? Don't try to sanitize this project. You'll lose the meaning. Understand when the wounded one shows up. My maestro, Jerry Teo, he's my tío. Right? He runs an organization called the National Compadres Network, who has amazing resources for schools, including like full-blown, right, curriculum, and does a lot of work in schools. But one of the teachings that he's given me is that he says that wounded children speak the most truth, and we resent them for it. So can we change our relationship, right, to the wounded one? Can we stop resenting them, making it messy, and understanding that the mess that they're bringing to us is actually a gift, right? But if we see it, right, as disrespect, right, then we make it about ourselves. That's all about our ego. But if we understand, right, that this young person is speaking a truth to us that is terribly inconvenient for the lesson plan I have developed, right? And we are trying to do adverbs right now, okay? Then we will continue to have these institutional relationships with children, right? But sacred relationships with children, understand that when a child's woundedness shows up, everything stops. Because that woundedness makes the community unwell, right? The more vulnerable, right, the more unwell the community is. So for each of these, what I'm going to show you, or for a couple of these, I can't do all of them because we don't have enough time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you video clips of teachers that are actually doing what the research is talking about, right? This is the big challenge for our field. We have amazing research, but closing the knowing-doing gap, right? The research to practice gap, that's the real challenge. And so I've been in enough of these talks where it's like all these dope resources and these amazing ideas, and it works great because I've got a clicker, right? But what I want you to also have burned in your brain is an example of what it actually looks like on the ground when things start getting a little messy. So this is a clip from an amazing documentary film that I recommend that you watch and that you share with your colleagues. It's a great teaching tool. The documentary film is called Children Full of Life. Also available on your streaming services. And it is a film crew follows over 2 years the National Teacher of the Year in Japan. Okay, and the reason I like to use this one is because when I do this work with schools, all over the U.S., folks are like, they're feeling it. Like most of us signed up, like this is exactly the kind of yes, right? Cosine, cosine, cosine. And then when we get into some of the Q&A, right, folks will often say, Jeff, I want to do like all of those things. And then what's the next word out of their mouth? Yeah. And then, right. And it's often about like institutional constraints and my principal and my superintendent, right. And all these like external factors over which they have zero control. Right. And so I like to use this film because it's in Japan. And Japan is one of the most professionally restrictive teaching environments that you can work in inside of the industrialized world. And yet he's doing this inside of that. And so if he can do it in Japan, right, we can certainly do it inside of the spaces where we do the work in the US, right? So here's a clip from Children Full of Life.
Late April, Ren Sueda comes to class for the first time in 4 days. His grandmother died. In his notebook, Ren writes about the death, the funeral, his loss.
21日の日曜日、呼ばれて2階に行ったらおばあちゃんは亡くなっていた。おばあちゃんは眠るように亡くなっていた。おばあちゃん
They were worried. They didn't know why Ren was away. Now they're moved at his pain and saddened by his loss.
告別式だった。最後のお別れに花をいっぱい入れてあげた。僕は涙がボロボロと出た。みんなも泣いていた。バスで火葬場へ行った。1時間ぐらいでおばあちゃんは骨になっていた。おばあちゃんがいなくなって寂しいです。はい。
手挙げてる人全員立ちなさい。
The letter unlocks some brutal and long-hidden memories.
私の誕生日の日の前の夜におじいちゃんが寝ながら亡くなってしまって、私はおじいちゃんの顔を見れずに、
Mifuyu has been holding down her memories for more than half her life.
が3歳の時にお父さんが亡くなって命の危機の時も行きたかったんだけど書こうと思ったんだけど書けないくらい悲しくてそれで私はお父さんが亡くなった時には3歳だったんだけどそういうことが分かっててそれで
She'd been afraid to talk about her father. She didn't want to seem different. She paid a price.
育ってたんだけど、でも涙が止まらなくて、電話ができないくらいだったので、その話を聞いて、私はすごく楽しかったです。
Now, at last, she feels safe enough to talk about her missing parent.
この学級で一番僕は辛い経験を持っているのは美冬だと思う。で、今日は僕は美冬がそのことを、いつも心にしまっておくと辛い。ね。な、美冬。だから一度は美冬がお父さんのことをみんなの前で言った方が気が楽になるだろうなと思ってたけども、その心をね、レンちゃんの頼りも開いてくれたわけだ。やめのな。調べて、 わかったことを書いていきます。
They're trying to understand. They all find it painful. Some find it unbearable.
よう、そんな臭いところで泣かんとくよ。はい。
Yo Enomoto is the class spark plug, high energy, charming.
大事なこと。
Now he's remembering the death of his grandmother.
そう思い出した。あ、それはいいこと、素敵なこと。はい。でも、はい、元気よくだ。はい、食べよう。はい。うん。一番はやっぱり共感だろうと思うね。まあ、僕なんか大好きな言葉に、心に人を住まわせる。うん。心に定員はないから、うん、そうやってみんなに語って、みんなに共感してもらって、本当にこう、聞く相手がいると、そうやって自分の心の中に人が住み着く。それが手紙ノートのものすごい大きな意味かなと。
Watch, right? The mastery that we see from him, right, as a pedagogue. Just a couple of things I want to point out. We're a little pinched on time, so I'm gonna, but I want to make sure that you get the last portion as well. So a couple of things I want to point out. Who's doing the healing in that classroom? They all are, right? And that's a really important lesson that I think a lot of times teachers try to take all this on themselves. And it's not possible. You can't carry all that woundedness. Right? But what medicine people do is they create environments of medicine where they understand that everybody's a medicine person, right? And that you're often not going to have the medicine that the child needs, but the homie across the table might, right? So it's about us facilitating the healing process, not being the sole healer in the room, right? The second thing that I want to point out is that he measures what matters. He's measuring empathy. Right? In the way, that's what he's looking for in their writing. That's what he's looking for in their response to reading, right? So when you talk about, or when you really reflect on the things that you want out of your practice, you also need to be thinking about how am I going to be tracking that in a way that isn't just anecdotal, okay? Because then you'll look for the stuff that you want to see that's evidence that you're doing it, right? So complexify the way in which you think about measurement. Okay, and start collecting data on the things that really matter to you in your practice. All right, so if we get those kind of relationships, then we got to ask ourselves, well, what are we actually teaching the babies? Okay, so I'm not big on checklists, but I'm in schools all the time that are saying they want to be community responsive, they want to be culturally responsive, they want to be culturally sustaining, they want to be culturally relevant. Okay, cool, right? I'm with that. So here's how you'll know. Okay? Everywhere you look in the spaces that you control, right? Your curriculum, your classroom, your walls, the hallways, the bathrooms, the lunchroom, the playground. Do you see students' lives, communities, families, and ethnic, cultural, and linguistic histories? Everywhere. Is there anywhere that children can go in your space where they are not affirmed about how much medicine their ancestors birthed them with? Okay, and that's what it means. Okay, to continually connect young people to relevant environments. And we have very clear cross-disciplinary research evidence about why this matters. And there's actually a logic flow to it. Okay, so I can't go into all the depth right now, right? But what happens is that when you create truly relevant environments, then kids move through these, okay, to get to what Dweck calls a critical growth mindset. How many of you are familiar with Carol Dweck's work, right? But schools and districts totally misused Carol's work. She got so pissed, she went and did changed her whole lecture and went and redid it, right? Because who were educators trying to get to have a growth mindset? Kids. They're like, oh, right. Of course, I'm not a bad teacher. It's the kids have a fixed mindset. So I'll just fix their fixed mindset and then I'll be an awesome teacher. right? And she's like, no, that is not what I said. What Dweck says is that the child's mindset reflects the adult's mindset. So if the child is showing you a fixed mindset, it's something, go back to the first one, it's something about your relationship with them, right? That's getting in the way of them having what they naturally have, which is a growth mindset. Okay, last one, responsibility, okay? So when you're doing this work, if you're focused on the most vulnerable and the most wounded ones, they are not going to welcome you in with open arms, right? They're going to keep you at arm's length, and that can be really painful. Especially if you start having, how many of you have had like a breakthrough with kids and you're like feeling really good about it and then they just tank out of nowhere, right? That's super painful. But understand that it's also very natural based on where they are. So of all the books that I've read to understand trauma in young people and both how to understand it, how to read, because look, the key is if you understand behaviors differently, you will react to them differently. Okay, that's the key to changing your reaction, is understanding it. This book by Bruce Perry is considered the nation's leading expert on child trauma. I would put Maestro Jerry Theo in that same sentence with him, right? Those two for me are some of the best, specifically for youth. Okay, this book is an amazing resource for educators because it actually gives you case studies of young people that experienced trauma that he worked with, and he helps you understand how the trauma shows up in school, how it shows up in other youth spaces, how to read it as trauma, not as bad behavior, but as woundedness emerging, right? And then what to do about it. Bruce Perry is the first medical researcher I've ever heard call teachers first responders. Because where does all youth trauma go? To us. Okay, so understanding trauma, understanding how to read it better, and understanding how to be a medicine person or a healer for trauma is really important to you being able to live up to your responsibility. Some other light reading for you. Hey, the one I'm going to highlight is Heather McGee's work. Okay, if you have not read The Sum of Us, right, it is the best book going to really help us understand why pivoting towards equity is so resisted in this society, right? It's a legal and historical legacy that we're trying to disrupt. So this book, 400 pages, right? Pretty great writing, right? But there's a podcast, okay? That's also really dope. So if you don't have time for the book, right, check out her podcast, same title, right? Also great resource. So I'm going to end just giving you a snapshot into my own class, okay? And the ways in which I wrestle with this stuff. And I try to do this, right, as an educator. And so first, I'm going to give you a trigger warning because some of the stuff that my student is going to talk about may be triggering for some of you. If you have had engagements or struggles or trauma or pain around sexual abuse, okay, that's going to come up. So I'm just alerting you now, and feel free to take whatever space you need. The other thing I want to say is that this did not happen overnight, okay? I loop with kids. So in my high school teaching, I do 4-year loops. So I have them in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, right? So this is 8 weeks in to her sophomore year. I had her in 9th grade. Okay? She's also my neighbor, right? So I've known her for a long time. And then 8 weeks into her second year with us, she decides that we've earned, right, the right for her to start telling us more of her story. Okay, and so this is what she shared with us. And when I think about my responsibility as an educator, this is who I think about.
My father called my guy's birthday. If I put a gun into my head and my life flashes from my God, I would see the times I would smoke with my cousins, drinking, smacking, doing powder till I knew I was too gone, cheating on my boyfriend with my ex because he would tell me he still loved me, lying to the people I love, hurting the people that care about me the most. And then I would see the reason why. I would see a little girl
You can do it. Okay. We're with you.
I was seeing a little girl getting raped at the age of 4 years old. She didn't know what to do or who to talk to. She was so afraid that she could cry and not tell anybody. She stayed silent. I would see 4 years passing by, rape after rape after rape. I would see an 8-year-old girl with more scars than birthdays. I would see a girl, no, I would see a 13-year-old girl getting raped by her first real boyfriend. I would see a girl who didn't know how to love herself. I would see me. And if I had a gun pointed to my head and I had minutes left to live, I would tell that little girl, it's okay to tell your mom. It's safe to cry. Go through your pain so you can heal. Drugs will not heal your pain, will not block it out. Love yourself. One day, trust somebody, love somebody. Let yourself be loved. If I had a gun pointed to at my head, I would cry and tell 15-year-old me, I love you, don't regret your mistakes. Because I've learned that my mistakes are the lesson I needed to learn self-care.
Okay, so just to wrap us up, what I want to point out, right, about this story is that she goes through kinder, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, my ninth grade class, before there's space in her educational environment to begin the healing process that comes when you start being able to tell your truth. Okay. And so when I think about the kind of environments that I want to see from my sons and for your sons and daughters and for all the young people that we serve in our communities, right? I think about her. Because if we're data-driven, really data-driven, we know that she's in our class. The data tells us so. And he's in our class. And for me, right, equity is not a concept, right? It's a lived set of principles that always connect back to our commitment to the most vulnerable and the most wounded ones. Keep them on your mind all the time when you think about your equity work. If I can support you in any way on that journey, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, I will have a breakout session where we can start unpacking some of this stuff for those of you that are able to be in there. But if not, or if you're just not in a headspace right now, like this is heavy, right? To really talk about this stuff, like really talk about it is heavy. Okay, and so if there's anything I can do to support you on your journey, please don't hesitate to reach out. I return every email I get. If I don't return your email, it means my son's deleted it. Which started happening to me in COVID. So don't be afraid to hit me up again, right? If you don't hear back from me. And if you send me the classic, like 4-page teacher email, right? Then I'll just shoot you back my cell phone and we can jump on the phone and have a conversation. Okay, but thank you for the work that you do. Thank the work for work you've done. Thank you for the work that you will do. We can't let them win, y'all. We got to reclaim these spaces for our young people. Peace, y'all.